So if she's had a previous cesarean scar or previous myomectomy scar, okay, so any scar on the uterus, you will not do an induction. If she's a case of heart disease, if there is a pelvic tumor which is going to obstruct your labor, if it is a premature baby, and in unexplained vaginal bleeding, you don't know where the bleeding is coming from, so you will not do an induction because she might bleed more. And pregnancy following a repair, vesicovaginal fistula repair. Okay, VVF repair never. It is always cesarean section. And fetal distress. Okay, so fetal distress, how can you come to know if the fetus has passed meconium? Meconium is the first stool that the baby passes. Okay, so meconium, or if the CTG is not reactive. Okay, so CTG today you will go back and read CTG and partogram. Okay, all of you, and cervical cancer. So if the mother has CA cervix, you cannot do an induction for her. Okay. So now the success of induction depends upon the period of gestation. So what if the uterus is more sensitive towards term? If it is a very preterm baby, more chances of us not having success of induction. Okay. Now, according to the patient, if she's a Paris lady, okay, so she's already given birth before, and then you do an induction, more likely that she will deliver. Sensitivity of the uterus, that is, it is more successful when the uterus contracts on massaging, or you do an oxytocin sensitivity test. So there's a test, oxytocin sensitivity test, that helps you to know whether the uterus will contract or not when you're giving oxytocin. Okay, and pre-induction scoring. So there's the Bishop score. The Bishop score is a score that we do to see the success of induction. Okay, so this is the Bishop score. So you are assessing the cervix. Okay, so dilatation of the cervix, consistency of the cervix. Consistency means firm, medium, and soft. The cervix can never be hard. Okay, so it is either firm or it is soft, or in between the two. Effacement. Okay, so effacement means how thinned out the cervix is. So effacement is seen in percentage. This only when you become experienced you will be able to come to know. Then the position of the cervix. So whether the cervix is posterior, it is middle, or it is anterior, and station of the presenting part. So have you people read normal labor? The chapter on normal labor, management of labor.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no? No?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So there is something known as station. So presenting part, you know what is the presenting part?
Yes, ma'am.
Definitions that you have to know, okay? If you want to understand obstetrics, you have to know a few definitions. Fetus in utero, that chapter you have to know, okay? So the presenting part is the part which is in the lower pole of the uterus, okay? So that is the part which we can feel when we're doing a pervaginal examination. So the station means how high or low is the fetus, okay? So this is one way of assessing how the labor is progressing. So the station of the head, or the head station, is denoted by, what is the landmark? Landmark is the ischial what? Ischial spine or tuberosity? Anyone?
Tuberosity.
Huh? It is the ischial spine, okay? So the ischial spine is the guides us as to know where the head is, how high or how low. If the head is at the level of the ischial spine, then it is at zero station. So that is noted as zero. Now, if you go 1 centimeters above, so if the fetus is above the ischial spine, that is more towards the mother, okay, above, towards the abdomen. So if it is above 1 centimeters above, it is known as -1. If it is 2 centimeters above, it is -2, the head station. The same thing if it is 1 centimeter below the ischial spine, that is, it is coming outside. Okay. So that means it is plusation. If it is 2 centimeters out below the ischial spine, then it is +2 station. Okay. So +1, +2 means it is more towards coming out. Okay. So, and -1, -2 is more towards the abdomen. So -3 or floating head. That's what we say. Okay. So station is, that's how you denote. Now position of the cervix is usually the cervix is posterior first initially. Then slowly it gets taken up, and then the last to go is the anterior rim. Okay, the cervix, when it gets fully dilated. Okay, so the last thing that goes or disappears is the anterior rim. So anterior cervix. So posterior, middle, and anterior. And effacement is in the percentage, and consistency we can come to know whether it is firm, soft. Okay, and os closed. Now, how do you come to know whether the how many centimeters is the os? Is by 2 fingers. Okay, so you put your 2 fingers inside, do a pearl vagina, look for the cervix. If the cervix is closed, you can come to know it is total. But if it is a little open, then you put your fingers inside the cervix and stretch your fingers. Okay, maximum how much it stretches. So that much is your how many centimeters. Now you take your hands out and you see how apart your fingers are. Okay, so that's how you come to know how. Did you understand? Did you people understand how to see the dilatation?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you put your fingers inside, separate your 2 fingers, and then how apart they are. So that is how many centimeters the cervix is dilated. Okay, understood? You want me to show you in the video? Or everybody has understood? Okay, I can't share the video right now because of the PowerPoint. Okay, so this is the score. Now, according to this, we give a score, and then total score is 13. Now, the favorable score is 6. So accordingly, if the cervix is 2 centimeters dilated, you will give a score of 1 for that. If the consistency, it is firm, then you will give 0 score. So you add up all these scores and see what the score is. If it is 6 to 13, it is okay, favorable. Okay. And if it is less than 6, it is usually a not favorable cervix. Okay. Now, what are the methods of induction? You have physical, medical, and surgical methods. Now, in physical, usually we do not do this, but you should know. So, stimulation with the nipple. So, you just stimulate the nipples, and usually it causes release of oxytocin, and that causes contraction of the uterus. This is not done. Okay, so you give an enema also. Sometimes when you give an enema, it causes stimulation of contractions. Okay, and stripping the membranes. Now, what is stripping the membranes? Okay, so you can see the fingers inside the cervix, and that is the head over here. Okay, so with the head, the membranes are well applied. So now what we are doing is we're putting a finger in between the gap between the cervix and the membrane. So we are putting our finger in between that gap and sweeping our fingers all around. So like that. Okay, 360 degrees, we are rotating our finger in that plane. So that sweeps away the membrane from the cervix. Ideally, the cervix will be loosely adherent to the membrane is loosely adherent to the cervix. So you just sweep it over. So sweeping will cause separating, and that stimulates release of prostaglandins, and that initiates induction. Okay, so stripping the membranes from its attachment from the lower segment when the Bishop score is favorable. Why has it to be favorable? Because at least the cervix has to be at least a little open to allow you to insinuate your finger inside. If it is totally closed, you cannot put your finger inside, right? So it has to be a little open cervix. Okay, so a patular cervix. It is used for cervical ripening. So what happens? Stretching of the cervix causes, so this is sweeping and stretching. So you're stretching the cervix and you're sweeping the membranes or stripping the membranes, okay? So you stretch the cervix, it causes liberation of endogenous prostaglandins. which helps in cervical ripening and initiation of labor. Okay, so sweeping the membranes and stretching the cervix. Surgical induction or ARM, which is very commonly employed in a labor room. Okay, so we usually use this. So it is rupturing the membranes below the presenting part overlying the internal os to drain some amniotic fluid. This initiates labor by stretching the cervix and separating the membranes. Again, there is liberation of prostaglandin and the reduction of amniotic fluid volume also. So that also helps in induction. So indications of this is of rupture of membranes is antepartum hemorrhage. You've had your class on antepartum hemorrhage?
Yes, ma'am.
Esther?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
So antepartum hemorrhage, but if it is placenta previa, you cannot do ARM, okay? Placenta previa means what? See, where you're doing your ARM, the placenta is right here. You're going to poke your thing inside and you're going to make her bleed. So it is only in abruptio placenta, okay? So abruptio placenta in chronic hydramnios, when there is a chronic polyhydramnios, okay? And see, you understand polyhydramnios and oligohydramnios? Yes or no? Poly means too much of liquor, oligo means less liquor, okay? So, and severe preeclampsia and eclampsia, we can do an induction, amniotomy, okay? So in an intrauterine fetal death, we do not do ARM, okay? Because the fetus is usually not, the head will not act as a good dilator, okay? Because it is all boggy, it becomes macerated, so it cannot act as a good dilator. So it is the membranes that acts as a good dilator in an IUFT. So you should never do an ARM in IUFT. And what is the limitation of ARM? You cannot do it in an unfavorable cervix. That means at least the cervix has to be open for you to allow to insinuate your finger inside and do an ARM. So you can see how it is being done. See, you put your finger, with this finger you're touching the cervix, right? See, this is going to prevent this coccus injuring your cervix. Sometimes what happens, the tooth of the coccus might poke into this the cervix. So that will cause bleeding over here. Okay, so that's why you have to, this finger is acting as a guard, and on the top, on this, over this finger we are putting our coccus, and then we are doing the ARM, or we are poking it. I'll show you how we do it. Okay, so before ARM, you take an informed consent from the patient. You tell her, I'm going to rupture your membrane, and then you do you have to do a palpation. Be sure of the fetal presentation, the position, okay, and the fetal heart rate has to be heard, and it has to be recorded if you can, and also the contraction has to be seen, and then you have to do aseptic method. Okay, so after an ARM, you exclude cord prolapse. Okay, what happens sometimes? The cord can come out. So what happens? I'll show you. What happens is sometimes when you're doing an ARM, see in this picture it can be seen. Now if the cord is by the side over here, that happens when the head is not well fixed. See here it is so well applied, there's no space at the sides, okay? Can you see there is no space in between the cervix and the head? It is nicely well applied. So when the head is like this, nothing will come out when you do an ARM. But when the head is a little up, okay, high, a little high, and then there is space over here and over here. So when you do an ARM, the cord will come down. So that is why it is very important, before doing an ARM, you have to confirm the presentation, the head station. So head has to be fixed like this. Nothing will come. Now I'll do an ARM, nothing will come out, only LICA will come. Sometimes when you do, the cord might come. So that will cause fetal distress. Okay, that is very bad. And then you have to run to the operation theater, okay, for a cord prolapse. So cord prolapse management is a total different chapter, okay. Note the color, the odor, and the consistency of the amniotic fluid, okay. So color, why is it important? Because sometimes there might be meconium. So meconium is what color? It is green, dark green, mehendi color, okay. So ideally the liquor is clear. It looks like water, okay. So ideally it should be like that. But if it is green, mehendi color, then that is the fetus has passed meconium. So there is distress. Another, it could also be blood tinged. So if it is blood tinged, there is some problem there. It could be a rupture, okay. Then also the smell. Sometimes if it is infected, okay, so she's having some infection, chorioamnionitis. In such patients, it might be smelly, very smelly. It happens, infections. So we've seen also such patients, okay. So it may be smelly. So you have to note that also. And consistency. And also the quantity, how much of it is coming. If it's very less, then maybe it is an oligohydramnios patient. If it is very much, then it could be polyhydramnios, taking out liters and liters of amniotic fluid. You know, it happens. Okay. So note the presentation, position, and station of the fetal head after an ARM. And you have to monitor. If it is very long, the labor is very long, then she might develop fetal infection. So to detect infections, you have to take her vitals regularly. It is there in your partograph. So if you see the partograph, today you go back and read partograph and labor, okay, normal labor. So if you don't read all that, you will not understand any chapters at all. And even it is going to be difficult for you because you people can't come for clinics. So it is all theory. So if you don't read your theory well, it's going to be difficult for you to understand, okay? So what are the disadvantages? Failure of the technique in unripe cervix. So you might not be able to induce her, okay? So if the cervix is very thick and you're doing an ARM, it is not going to help. There could be cord prolapse, there could be chorioamnionitis, neonatal sepsis. There could be accidental hemorrhage because if it is a polyhydramnios patient and you're doing an ARM, suddenly there is decompression and the placenta might suddenly separate. Okay, and something known as dry labor. That is, if you do an ARM very early and there is no liquor at all, she might have a dry labor. So, an accidental injury to the placenta, cervix, or the uterus. I told you if your coccus, how do you do an ARM? You use the coccus forceps, okay? So the coccus forceps has a tooth at its end, and then it just bites on the membrane, and then it injures the membrane and creates a hole over there, and you put your finger inside and expand the hole. So that's how you do an ARM. Now, if that coccus is you're going to go and bite the cervix, imagine it's going to bleed. Okay, if the placenta is down below, again, I told you placenta previa, we do not do an ARM, that's why, okay? Or it can also injure the uterus. Okay, and fetal parts also. Sometimes if you're going to do a lot of poking, you might injure the fetal head. There might be a laceration on the fetal scalp. After delivery, you will note that, okay? Or vasa previa. So what is vasa previa? These are vessels of the fetus. So this also you must have done in your APH class, okay? And Liker amni embolism. Now what is this? This is after you do an ARM, sometimes there is amniotic fluid embolism. Okay, so that is a very different chapter. So that is hypersensitivity due to this, to the things that are released from the amniotic fluid. So she'll have features like pulmonary embolism. Okay. So yeah, that's why you have to be very careful. You have to watch her. That is the part who is there always. That's why the pulse, blood pressure, everything you have to see. Okay. Now that was surgical induction. Now we're talking about medical. So medical induction by drugs like prostaglandins. Okay. So two prostaglandins that we use for induction is PGE1 and PGE2. E1 is misoprostol, okay, and E2 is dinoprostol, okay. So PGE2 is it is available in a gel form. Nowadays we don't get it because misoprostol is in a tablet form. It is very easy to carry. You don't have to store it anywhere. It is not cumbersome to store. You can keep it in your pocket. It's very easy, misoprostol, okay, to store. But dinoprostol, you have to store it in the fridge, and it is in the gel form. It is preloaded syringe type, okay, so which you push into the cervix. So that is a little difficult. So that's why nowadays it is more or less, it is not available nowadays. They've stopped making it only. So misoprostol. So misoprostol are tablets, but still you have to know PGE1 and E2. E2 is in the gel form, E1 is in the tablets form, okay? So what are the side effects of these two? That is uterine hyperstimulation, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, flushing, headache, fever, uterine rupture sometimes if you use it injudiciously, and sometimes meconium stained liquor. Now, how do we do induction is misoprostol is available in 150 micrograms. Okay, so one you get 200 micrograms also, you get 100 micrograms tablet also, you get 50 micrograms also. So 50 micrograms tablet we put in the cervix or in the posterior fornix. So you understand the posterior fornix, that's the part behind the cervix, okay? So 50 micrograms is kept in the posterior fornix. Two doses are kept 6 hours apart. Okay, so 6 hours apart, two doses, 50 micrograms. Okay, that is how we do an induction of labor in our hospital, okay, and usually otherwise also, in other places also. Okay, so oxytocin, now another induction of drug is oxytocin. So you could induce with prostaglandins or you could induce with oxytocin. So with oxytocin, it initiates uterine contraction and maintains normal pattern till delivery and at least 30 to 60 minutes beyond that. It is used intravenously and nasal or buccal. The COG recommends starting at the least dose and gradually increasing the infusion rate. So whenever you're doing oxytocin induction or whenever you're using oxytocin, you always start with the least dose and then you gradually increase. So how you increase is you monitor her contractions, okay? So contractions have to be monitored every half an hour, and the drop rate is also increased every half an hour. So after half an hour, I will see the contractions if the contractions are not adequate. So what were adequate uterine contractions? 3 lasting for at least 45 seconds. So I forgot to tell you, you always take contractions for 10 minutes. Okay, so always, whenever you're asked to check your contractions for a patient, you sit with the patient beside her and with your hand on the fundus for 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes, how many contractions are going to come? So 1 contraction, 2 contraction, 3 contractions, how many? So accordingly, we will say adequate contractions or not. Okay, so at least 3 contractions and moderate ones. Okay, so 45 seconds. So 20 to 40 seconds is moderate, right? So moderate contractions, at least 40 seconds or 45 seconds in 10 minutes. And that's if the contractions are that much, you do not increase the drip rate. Okay, but if the contractions are not that much, then you have to increase the drip rate. That means the oxytocin is not enough. Okay, so contractions have to be monitored. So at least 3 contractions in 10 minutes, each lasting for at least 40 seconds. Okay, so you continue the same concentration according to whatever concentration you have used. Okay, so again, oxytocin is more sensitive in women who are multipara, or if the uterus is already contracting. That is if you have to augment. And it is less effective in IUFT and elderly, in a primigravida, in somebody with an unfavorable cervix. So usually what we are doing is oxytocin, we're giving 5 units in 500 ml. Okay, so this is not what we use, this regime. So we use 5 units in 500 ml of NS and RL or NS or RL, and we start the drops at 10 drops, 20, 30, 40. So up to 40 we go, okay? So you have to know what drip rate we are doing in our hospital, okay? So you can all write it down. So we start with 5 units of oxytocin, which is added in 500 ml of RL, and then the drip, and we start with 10 drops per minute, okay? So 10, 20, so every half an hour we increase the drip rate by 10 drops. So 10 by 20, then from 20 to 30, and then up to 40. If the contractions are not adequate, if they are adequate, you will not increase. If it is adequate at 10 drops only, so you will keep it at 10 drops only. You will not increase the drip rate, okay? So contractions, at least 3 contractions in 10 minutes lasting for 40 seconds. Okay. So before you start the oxytocin drip, you have to make sure the bladder is empty, and then you have to monitor her labor with the help of a partograph. Take the FHS every 15 minutes and you give it in a drip, okay, IV drip infusion. Okay, so how can you give medicines? You can give in a bolus form. Bolus is you just push it, IV bolus. You can give in a drip. So you mix it in the fluid and then give it in slow infusion. Okay. So we are giving oxytocin in a infusion form. Okay. So how do you monitor the progress of labor? By the head descent and the cervical dilatation. Okay. And this is basically meaning that you have to maintain a partograph. So again, after 30 minutes, you observe for 3 contractions in 10 minutes, lasting for more than 40 seconds. If yes, then you continue the infusion at the same rate. FHS is recorded every 30 minutes. You monitor the progress of labor using the partograph. If no, then you increase the infusion by 10 drops per minute every 30 minutes to maximum 60 drops per minute. Okay. Take and record the FHS every 30 minutes. Usually we keep it at 40 drops per minute, and if needed, we can go up to 60. Usually we will keep it at 40 drops, so we can go up to 60 drops also. Monitor the progress of labor using the partograph, and in the next point, syntocinon or oxytocin drip is given in 5, I told you, 5 units in 500 ml. Increase the drip rate, okay? Failed induction is if there is inadequate contraction despite your oxytocin. Okay, so what are the signs? Now, when you're giving oxytocin, you have to know something known as hyperstimulation. Because if it increases use of oxytocin, there might be hyperstimulation. Are you all there? All of you are there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Or you've fallen asleep, all of you? There's nobody there.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody's there?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So hyperstimulation is something when you're giving oxytocin and the uterus is becoming hyperstimulated. There's lots of contractions. Okay, too many contractions is hyperstimulation. So contraction is occurring more frequently than every 2 minutes. So so it is occurring more frequently than every 2 minutes. So in 10 minutes, there is more than 5 contractions. Okay. Duration of one contraction is more than 90 seconds. So it is going on. It is not stopping only that contraction. So that is hyperstimulation. When you're putting your hand on the abdomen, on her fundus, and you're feeling, and the contraction is going on and on for 90 seconds is a very long time. The baby, why hyperstimulation is dangerous? Because for 90 seconds, the baby cannot tolerate the stress. Okay, when a contraction is happening, the blood flow to the baby is stopped for that point. Okay, so baby will not be able to withstand that so much of stress. So it is very dangerous hyperstimulation. If the contractions are also too many, what happens before the blood circulation is resumed to the baby? Again, there's another contraction. So again, that is dangerous. So even if it is increased frequency, means many contractions coming, short contractions, but many in 10 minutes, or one contraction lasting for more than 90 seconds. Both of them are dangerous, okay, for the baby. So you have to monitor your contractions. That is why it is important. Each time you're increasing the drip rate, you have to see the contractions, okay? Then there could be deceleration in the fetal heart sound. So fetal heart sound, you will hear it is ekdam slow. You've not come to the labor room, so you don't know. So FHS is very slow. Okay, so there could be all sustained contractions. The uterus is contracting throughout. A patient is also saying, I don't have any pain-free interval. And there's increasing pain because of increased frequency, duration, and intensity. So this is very important. Now, when you're giving a prostaglandin, the prostaglandin for induction, we could not monitor we were not monitoring the contractions, okay? Because when you're giving prostaglandins, there's nothing that you've already given it. You can't stop it, okay? So, but in oxytocin, what happens? The drip is going. So if you stop the drip, the thing will reverse, okay? So that is why you have to monitor each time you're increasing the drip. But in prostaglandins, what happens? You just put it one time and then you see the patient, you listen to the FHS, you monitor her, but every half an hour is not important. But when you're giving oxytocin, you have to every half an hour, okay? So now if there is hyperstimulation, when you come to know, then first thing you have to stop the oxytocin drip, okay? So you stop it immediately. Start RL, okay? So give her Ringer's lactate and put oxygen. Keep her on her left side and increase the drip rate, okay? So you give her fast fluid, okay? RL is given fast, all right? So this way, and then in half an hour, 20 minutes, the thing will revert. So it will become okay. Okay, so half-life of oxytocin is very less. That is why it will reverse back. But you have to identify it early, otherwise the baby will be gone. And you'll keep on giving oxytocin. She's having hyperstimulation, you haven't identified it, and then you'll have an IUFT, okay, intrapartum fetal death.
Ma'am, किन left side मा राख्ने woman लाई?
Left मा राख्दाखेरि तिम्रो aortic cable compression जान्छ and blood flow to the uterus increases. Okay, and the cord compression for the baby also, the flow will increase. Okay, so left मा राख्दाखेरि के हुन्छ left lateral. Left मा राखेपछि तिम्रो uterusले compress गर्दैन नि त. It falls on your left. And right side, you can get the blood flow, aortic cable compression hudaina, okay? So blood flow to the uterus is increased, and then because of that, the flow to the baby will also increase. So combined method is medical and surgical both together. Usually we are always doing the combined method. So what we do over here is we do the medical method, okay? That is, we'll give the prostaglandin. And then after that, when she starts progressing, when her os opens, when her cervix opens a little, then we will do an ARM. So ARM was the surgical method, okay? Because we're poking the membrane. So it is rupturing the membrane. So it is surgical. So medical and surgical methods are commonly used to increase the efficacy of induction by reducing the induction to delivery interval. Oxytocin infusion is started either prior to or following rupture of membranes. Okay, and the advantages are it is more effective than a single procedure. It shortens the induction to delivery interval, and then so the risk is reduced. Okay, risk of infection and all the other risks. Okay, mother also gets exhausted if the labor is very long. So all of the risk is reduced. Okay. So now what are the dangers? Okay, there could be an upset, psychological upset for the patient when the induction is failed, and increased operative interference. So it means that because you've started the process of induction, now you have to deliver the baby, right? So if she's not going to, if it's going to take a long time, you might have to go for cesarean section, or you might have to go for operative vaginal deliveries like instrumental deliveries. Okay, so you might have to do a forceps or vacuum to expedite the delivery. So it increases the operative interference. There's increased need of analgesia during labor, and there is obviously increased morbidity to the mother and the baby. And that is why you have to be very careful when you're doing an induction. You have to be sure that it is needed. Okay. Do not do unnecessary induction. So what are the complications? There could be rupture uterus. There could be fetal distress. Okay. So that is it. Now, do you have any questions related to the topic induction of labor?